21st century. Of course, I do not need to remind a Human Rights Council that all this represents clear breaches of multiple international human rights instruments that India is party to. This is the real story of the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and its people under subjugation that India is desperate to hide from the world. This is the true face of the so-called largest democracy of the world. This is the conduct of a country which aspires to be a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Mr. President, at the root of this mayhem is India's refusal to grant the people of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir their right of self-determination. This 7-decade-old travesty of justice has been compounded by the present Indian government's nefarious and twisted dream outlined explicitly in the ruling party's manifesto to turn by force of arms Jammu and Kashmir's Muslims majority into a minority. India's unilateral actions of 5th August 2019 of altering the status of occupied Jammu and Kashmir, recognized as a disputed territory by the UN Security Council, are illegal under international law. With these illegal changes, India's presence is, by its own yardstick, a naked foreign occupation. These measures contravene the 4th Geneva Convention that prohibits migration to and from an occupied territory. They are also a flagrant violation of several UN Security Council resolutions. India's assertion that these actions are its internal affair is patently false. As a matter of fact, Jammu and Kashmir has been on the agenda of the United Nations for over 17 years now. The meeting of the Security Council on the 16th of August to discuss the Jammu and Kashmir dispute is an attestation of this fact. What is happening in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is not a country-specific situation in this Council's parlance. The atrocities and abuses are being inflicted upon the people of a disputed and occupied territory as affirmed by international law. The situation in this occupied territory must therefore be of direct international concern. It is not and can never be an internal matter for India. Excellencies, the forlorn, traumatized towns, mountains, plains and valleys of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir reverberate today, and with the grim reminders of Rwanda, Srebrenica, and the Rohingya and the pogrom of Gujarat. The people of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir are apprehending the worst. Some have said that Kashmir echoes with the silence of the graveyard. Others contend that it is a lull before a storm. I shudder to mention the word genocide here, but I must. With the respect to the Genocide Convention, the Kashmiri people in the occupied territory as a national, ethnic, racial and religious group of people face grave threats to their lives, way of living and livelihoods from a murderous, misogynistic and xenophobic regime. One international civil society organization based in the United States has already issued a genocide alert proclaiming that the situation in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir has crossed the 10 stages of the genocidal process. Distinguished delegates, India's effort to hide its atrocities in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir by falsely labeling it terrorism and cross-border terrorism are shameless and indefensible. Pakistan has suggested a number of bilateral and multilateral mechanisms that would disprove India's self-serving claims. We have recently proposed to double the strength of the UN observers mission to monitor the line of control. India outrightly rejects all these proposals. I have every fear that India will once again resort to false flag operations and the use of the bogey of terrorism as a red herring to divert international opinion, even attack Pakistan. Another Indian ploy to deflect attention is its increasing violations of the 2003 ceasefire understanding on the line of control and regular and persistent targeting of civilians in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. India has used cluster munitions and heavy artillery in flagrant disregard of fundamental norms of international humanitarian law. This must end immediately. Mr. President, I have regularly sensitized the UN Security Council about the grave dangers to peace and security in nuclearized South Asia and beyond, as a result of India's reckless posture and draconian measures. We have welcomed consultations by Security Council members on the unfolding developments. While the Security Council is seized of peace and security dimensions of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, the Human Rights Council must pay far greater and immediate attention to the human rights of the people of the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In doing so, the Human Rights Council has, for its consideration, the two Kashmir reports issued by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in June 2018 and July 2019. Both reports make a clear recommendation to this Council to constitute an independent commission of inquiry to investigate and report human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir. I reiterate from this platform Pakistan's endorsement of the recommendations of these reports. We urge focused discussions on the two reports in the Human Rights Council and a unanimous decision by this House to implement their recommendations made to India, Pakistan, and foremost to the Human Rights Council. If India has nothing to hide, it should allow unhindered access to the Commission of Inquiry as recommended by the UN High Commissioner. Pakistan stands ready to allow access to the proposed Commission of Inquiry or other mechanisms on our side of the line of control, together with similar access to Indian-occupied and Jammu and Kashmir. Mr. President, the Human Rights Council must pay heed to the plight of the Kashmiri people and address the warning signs of a looming catastrophe to the Human Rights Council. The Council should immediately take the following steps. It should allow unhindered India access to immediately the Commission of Inquiry, the use of pellet guns, recommended by the UN High Commissioner, lift the curfew, reverse the clampdown and communications blackout, restore fundamental freedoms and liberties, release political prisoners, stop targeting human rights defenders, and fulfill obligations under the United Nations Security Council resolutions and various human rights instruments as required by international law. India's draconian emergency laws in occupied Jammu and Kashmir cannot be allowed to stand. 2. Take these steps to bring justice to the perpetrators of human rights violations of the innocent Kashmiri people, and in this context constitute a commission of inquiry as recommended by the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. 3. Authorize the Office of the High Commissioner and the Human Rights Council special procedures mandate holders to monitor and report on India's human rights violations in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and regularly update this Council. And fourthly, call upon India to allow unhindered access to human rights organizations and international media to the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Excellencies, today I have knocked on the doors of the Human Rights Council, the repository of the world's conscience on human rights, to seek justice and respect for the people of the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. At stake is our collective humanity, the principles that we all subscribe to, and what makes us human. We must not let political, commercial, and parochial considerations cloud and impair our thoughts and actions. We must not allow this august body to be embarrassed on the world stage. As a founding member of this Council, Pakistan feels morally and ethically bound to prevent this from occurring. But to do so, we must not remain indifferent to the tragedy that is unfolding before our eyes. We must act decisively and with conviction. Distinguished delegates, let us not forget that history is replete with failed, barbaric campaigns to wage demographic wars to change facts on the ground. India's attempt must fail, but this inevitability must occur without allowing the illegal Indian occupation forces to spill any more innocent blood. For 7 decades, the people of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir have awaited implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions prescribing a plebiscite to honor their right to self-determination. History would be a most unforgiving judge. If we fail yet again the people of this illegally occupied territory in their moment of greatest peril. Mr. President, let the world not forget the disastrous legacy of appeasement and the great cost of it to Europe. I invite everyone here to join us as we rise for justice.